Hey, it's Sam aboard the Here's to Us, and I am standing in the VIP room in the forward part of the boat. I'm facing aft, so the front of the boat's that way, and we're going to go downstairs into the engine room, take a little tour of the engine room since y'all been asking for that. Anytime I go down in the engine room, I have this little light. I turn it on so I can see down there, even though there's a light. So let's go downstairs and take a look. So down into the ER or engine room we go. We're going to lift up that stair panel, and it's on some struts that make it easy to lift up, and that's the view down the steps we see. But first, we'll also notice two things that are important. One is the light switch on the left, which is a pull switch, and then this all-important placard that the Coast Guard is going to want to see, and you need to know where that is. That is a required placard that you have to have on your boat so that they know that you know the discharge of oil is prohibited in the waters. So we're down in the engine room now, and it's not a stand-up engine room, but you can kind of crouch there. You don't have to crawl, so it's a cross between a crawl-in engine room and a stand-up engine room. So we're looking toward the back of the boat now, and the starboard engine is on the left and the port engine's on the right. So I'll try to keep you oriented as we go through here. So I'm going to turn my head a little bit to the left, and I'm going to see the array of hoses that have to do with the forward and aft head. Well, there's the pump there as well for the forward, and in particular you're going to see a valve here that is very important when you get a vessel safety check. That is the overboard waste pump. In other words, if you were going to pump your waste overboard, you'd pull that pump and you could pump your waste overboard, but you have to be 3 miles offshore to do that. So you will see that they are very picky about this valve not only being off but safety wired, or in this case I use a zip tie, and according to the inspectors, that is acceptable. So to the right of that, you will start to see the generator, and in between the generator is a battery switch, and that battery starts the generator. You can isolate that battery by turning it off. And then you will see in front of that, I've placed not only some tools there, but I have some spill pads, and I have two special tools that I have had made to ensure that I can get to the seacocks on both the main engines. And I'll talk a little bit about those as we move toward the back of the boat and see those valves. There is the generator, and it's a Kohler generator. It puts out 13.5 kilowatts, which is enough to power everything on the boat, including all 5 air conditioners. We've never had all 5 on at one time, but we could power many of the air conditioners, whether downstairs or upstairs, and run everything on the boat at 13.5 kilowatts. I can start the generator downstairs, or I can also start it upstairs at the AC control panel and put the generators online from that particular panel upstairs. There's another shot of the generator. Now I'm looking to keep you oriented. I'm looking at the starboard side of the boat and slightly forward on the boat. There is space between the generator and the forward part of the engine, and you can see right there is a brand new hose. That is a hose that takes the water from the seacock from the generator intake and cools the generator. I'm now looking at the forward part of the starboard engine, and I want to point out here not only the coolant that you see, that blue, but the ray core that is above that, and I have what's called a filter minder on there. And that filter minder helps me see if I start to have any blockage in my ray core filters, which is a fuel filter. There again, to keep you oriented, you'll see that ray core filter in the upper left, and this is a starboard engine looking aft, and we're going to start to see as we get further back in the engine room, you'll see the battery bank there. So we'll point some of these things out as we go further aft. Another close-up view of the starboard engine. And then I talked about those tools that I had. The starboard seatcock handle is in yellow there, and you can see it really is about 4 feet back there, and while you could crawl in there and do that with your hands, you'd have a hard time getting out, and it might be painful because you're crawling across the transmission assembly that's in there. So I had that tool made so that I could turn that off, and that's important to turn that off so that you can clean out your sea strainers on your engines. There's a close-up of that handle as I had my phone on a selfie stick to be able to get back there and take a picture of that particular handle. Diesel's like air, so it's very important to keep your air filters clean. This one was recently replaced. Now we're looking straight at the back of the boat, the firewall as I call it there, and there's about as far back as we can get in the engine room at this point. And I want to call your attention to the yellow circle up there, or oval. That is the camera that looks toward the engine room, so I can monitor what's going on in the engine room, see if there's any smoke or anything going on down there. And Rev also can see me if I go down in the engine room and she's at the helm while we're underway. She can see me down there and keep a check on me. We'll see battery bank 1, which is 4 golf cart batteries, and battery bank 2, which is an 8D starting battery, but we can use either one with a battery selector switch that is in the salon that you may have seen earlier in one of the videos. To the left of that battery bank is a charger, and it's a 20 amp charger, and that's used specifically for the thrusters and the Freedom Lift. You also see a battery on and off switch for that bank of batteries, and then to the right of that, the Fireboy Halon system. As we continue further looking toward the port now, looking toward the right part of the engine room, looking aft, we're now going to be looking at the port side of the boat, and we see a charger that was deactivated. Took me a while to figure out why it was deactivated, and that's because the boat was installed later. It has an inverter / charger on it that is under the master stateroom bed. So that is a deactivated charger, but it could be reactivated for some other use in the future. As we look under that battery bank, we see a number of items down there. That is the mid bilge pump way in the back, and in the foreground you see the fresh water pump. That's when we turn the water on. That little DC pump takes care of pressurizing the water in the system so that it'll come out through the spigots and also be able to provide water to flush the vacuum flush heads as well as the showers. You also see here on the starboard side, the wall here is an oil change system for the main engines, the port and the starboard engine, so that it's easy to be able to get the oil out of the engine and then pump new oil into the engine. As we look at the port side now, we're aft in the engine room, and there is the port seacock handle. And again, I had to have another tool specially fabricated so I could reach back there and get that handle closed in that closed position so that I could go ahead and clean out the sea strainers. And just looking up from that is what is called the synchronizer mechanism. And if you've seen the bridge video so far, you've noticed that we have a synchronizer on the boat that matches the RPMs of each engine, and that is that mechanism there that takes care of doing all that. So I'm now kind of moving forward to the front of the boat, backing up, and I'm looking at the port engine facing slightly aft. And again, the engines are Cummins 8.3 liters, developing 450 horsepower apiece. Another view of that port engine, and you can see this Raycor here. This picture was taken earlier before I put that filter minder on it. So if you have a Raycor system, that's probably what yours looks like if you don't have the filter minder on it. And then if you put the filter minder on it, that's what it looks like. So you can gauge if there's any blockage in that fuel filter. This is a new alternator, actually a rebuilt alternator we had done and put on both of the engines in about June of 2020. Continuing to look toward the port side of the boat, and now moving forward in the boat, and we're going to be going back to where we started from. You see that main port tank there. That port tank, just like the one on the starboard side for the fuel, contains, when full, 232 gallons. Below that, you'll see the accumulator pressure tank that keeps the water pressurized so that when we turn on water, we have pressure coming from it. To the right of that, I think it was about 2018, we put a brand new water heater in, so we have 20 gallons of hot water. Now I try to keep my tools organized, and originally I had a Craftsman toolbox down there, but it was real difficult to move it around in case I had to crawl back there, so I really went to these lightweight Sterilite containers, and I have them organized so I know what is in each one. I keep my spares in there. You can see some spare filters, tools, wrenches, so I know where things are at any time when I get down in the engine room. And so what I did was I also velcroed them so that they don't slide around if we're in heavy seas, so that they're velcroed, and I've never had them come loose. Now, one of the more confusing things to me when I got the boat was, okay, this is the fuel selector panel. So you have on the left, you have the port engine, and on the right, you have the starboard engine. And that the way that the handles are right now is these are feeding. Each engine is feeding from its respective main tank. So it says port tank, it's pointing toward that port tank, and it's pointing toward the starboard main tank. If I wanted to feed from the auxiliary tanks, I would switch those handles like this so that they point toward the aux tank on each of the engines. And it's possible to feed from the main tank on one engine and the aux tank on another engine, although I've never done it, but if you had a fuel imbalance for whatever reason, you could do that. Underneath the fuel selector panel, I have a little bit of room to put some storage containers there with extra oil, cleaning supplies, and things like that. Now we're getting back toward to where we started from, and this is, to keep you oriented, I'm looking toward the front part of the boat now. I'm still on the port side, and you see an assembly here. This is a fuel transfer assembly. So the way that this works is, the first thing to do is where that yellow arrow is I zero that out, and there's a gauge on there. It will say 0. Then I turn that gold lever in line with the plumbing so that the fuel will flow. And then once I've determined if I'm transferring from port to starboard or starboard to port, it's a simple which way are you going to push the switch. And from there I can see the number of gallons that are transferred. Now we don't have to do this much, but if we do run the generator drains out of the starboard main tank. So we may have to move some fuel from the port tank to the starboard tank. It's almost time to go out of the engine room, and so we would go up those stairs toward the front of the boat. But before we do, there's one more thing to look at. It's the bilge pump. You can see that is the forward bilge pump, and that forward bilge pump, we also see once we get up on it, we would see also the VIP day head shower sump is there. So those float switches turn on automatically if the water gets too high and drains out. And also the bilge pumps in the boat, all 3 bilge pumps are hot wired to the battery. As long as there's battery power, it will go ahead and pump out your bilges. So I hope you enjoyed the tour through our engine room on the Here's to Us. We're going to exit there, close the door, and we'll see you the next time on the Here's to Us. Hey, it's Sam. I'm aboard the Here's to Us, and I am standing in the VIP room facing aft. So the front of the boat is back there, and we're going to go down in the engine room and take a tour of the engine room. But first, anytime I go down in the engine room, I take this little light with me. Didn't go on, did it? Okay, so let's try it again. So do it.
No, I love it. Keep going.
So anytime I go down in the engine room, I have this little headlamp that I put on, and was it already on? Let's start over. Come on.